So expanding upon what we started with, everybody's first question is, what should I build? Mm-hmm. And there's a whole range of things. When you're talking about or thinking about infill, urban infill or suburban infill, often missing middle comes up. And the missing middle has a wide range of built forms. They can start with something as small as a carriage house and oftentimes can go right up to, 6-story single or double lot infill. Mm-hmm. For the most part in British Columbia, most of the infill we're going to see related to the provincial regulations we talked about in prior videos is going to be smaller built forms. So 3 stories and under, and ranging from anywhere adding 1 unit up to 6 units on a site. So there's a few different things that we can talk about when we think about what to build. Infill and missing middle, the relationship between the two and maybe how they're a little bit different. Keeping existing houses on site versus a completely clean start, so demolishing and building everything brand new. And then, of course, the suburban and urban options.
I think it's important, though, to step back and kind of explain to people what that missing middle is, because that's a term that we use a lot in politics and in our industry, but that someone may be hearing just absolutely for the first time.
Yeah, it's a great question. So oftentimes when there's new development, people think of single family, maybe townhouses or high-rise. So the reason why it's called the missing middle is it's everything in the middle between those built forms. So it's generally missing middle is excluding traditional single family homes. And it's also generally excluding really large format, multiple hundred units at a time. So anything and everything in between. Again, it could be a carriage house, just adding something simple in your backyard or on your laneway, or it could be just a 20 unit, 20 units and 4 stories.
Right.
So it's really everything in the middle of those the bookends of density.
So yeah, and then as you sort of mentioned in our other videos, also sort of that missing middle of finance, right? So that missing middle of buying your first home as a single family home, or buying your first home as a condo. It's sort of getting that, instead of doing those 2 jumps, is getting all of those different home styles in between. Or the missing middle of what does retirement look like now? As opposed to a cabana in Florida and a condo in Kelowna, does it look like shared spaces of land with different kinds of homes? And a lot of that missing middle product are projects that lots of people can take on, right? You don't necessarily need, like, obviously you get into condos and stuff, that's you're
gets a little more complicated.
Yeah. But when we're talking about, adding a duplex to a property or adding a carriage home to a property, these are projects that homeowners can work with different teams to put together. And it's a lot of the reason why we came together to create Performance Infill, is to help people have a place to go to learn and or work with us to develop those properties with them, right? I think it's a great time to say we're Performance Infill. Hello, Performance Infill. So, I mean, when you're first approaching this, so, okay, we've talked about BC is blanketed all single family lots with a multi-family zoning. So, and they have pretty much given all the different municipalities till June to implement their new land code.
Yeah.
And there's some ways you can figure out how and what you can do. You can approach your municipality development counter, talk to a planner, and get some guidance. There is a great online mapping system that most municipalities throughout BC have incorporated into their website.
The GIS.
GIS.
Simply by punching in your address, you can pull up your zone, your site plan, your lot size.
Any easements or right-of-ways that might be on your property would impinge your ability to develop in the future.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of just general information is right there to know kind of where you can start. Of course, there's a certain language they're talking, which is why there are developers in this world, right? That there's certain things we're looking for that we notice that give you this is a good to go to the next step to find out the answers to more questions, or no, this is going to be something hindering in the way of what you're doing.
So that's one of the first steps of starting an infill development is realizing what your zoning is and what the max ability is. That doesn't mean you can do it though, right, Andrew? Like,
Yeah, there's all sorts of different dynamics that you need to consider. You need to consider the local neighborhood, if there are any design guidelines related to that. You need to consider the roadways, if there's going to be any infrastructure and frontage upgrades that might be required. You need to look at what kinds of utilities are available. Sometimes there may not be water capacity, for instance, or electricity capacity. You might need a transformer or sewer, size. At minimum, your chances are you're going to have to divide however many pipes come onto your property for the different utilities. But there in many cases can be more extensive civil upgrades, civil infrastructure upgrades.
well, I mean, is your lot flat, sloped? Does it go, if your backyard drops to a quarry,
Yeah.
may not be the right, it might not be a pathway you want to financially go down.
Or do you have like a non-disturb that you're not aware of, right? That portion of your yard that's always been left green.
There may be a reason why.
may be a reason why.
There's never a house built on it.
Exactly.
Exactly.
And using the resources from that the city provides, the counter is a great one. And a lot of people, sometimes get intimidated to go up to the counter, don't even know that exists. But a lot of municipalities, if not all of them, they do offer kind of information. If you just go up front, you can tell them your address, and they will give you general guidelines around what you can do there and what you can't. And the GIS, the mapping system that most cities have in place, that'll give you kind of really fine-tuned kind of measurements of your property or easements and things like that. So really important is.
You may learn that your neighbor has moved his fence onto your property.
Exactly.
You may not even know that, right? You've been sharing this common fence line for the last 20 years and realize that he did it when you weren't there, and he's taken an extra 4 feet.
His background due diligence, if you will, that we're talking about varies depending upon the suburban or urban nature. So, for example, like a no disturbance covenant or green belt is more likely to be encountered in a suburban area as opposed to an urban area.
Yes.
And infrastructure upgrades are often more likely to be needing of upgrades in an urban setting as opposed to a suburban setting. Not always. I mean, it can go either way. But
Especially in somewhere like Kelowna that's older. A lot of those services haven't been touched because the houses haven't been touched. The sidewalks haven't been touched, if there's sidewalks at all, right?
Yeah. And the other thing to consider is, are you, mid-neighborhood or are you at the end of the neighborhood? So if you're at the end of the block, you're often going to be requiring different access points or less access points.
Yeah.
And you're going to be requiring a greater degree of civil upgrades. Whereas if you're in the middle of the block, then maybe the rest of your road has already been upgraded and you're one of the last lots in, or sometimes you're the first lot in. And the city will deal with whether you're first or last in different ways and in different areas.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
And I think that the big thing is like, this is not like a cookie cutter, rinse and repeat process.
Unfortunately.
No.
It would be easier for everybody involved if you could take the same plan and the same design and say use it on 75% of the lots. Yeah.
Well, and even year to year, codes are changing, bylaws are changing. Andre and I built a four-plex together 6 years ago.
Yeah, it's edition 2020.
If we turned around, tore that down, and restarted today, it would be completely
Couldn't build it today. Yeah, no.
completely different.
What?
There's provincial codes. There's the federal building code. There's step codes, the energy step code.
That's
all
all
of those things tend to ratchet up and get. I mean, ultimately, at the end of the day, you get a better build form, but it adds complexity and expense while we're on our way to those better build forms.
Well, and at that time, I could only build a 2-story. I could build a 3-story.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so this is where I think it becomes intimidating and yet frustrating too, because you own your property and you have to ask a whole bunch of people what you can do to it. I mean, they're telling you what you cannot do to it. And sometimes when you go back, you get a different answer too, because things are always changing and it is up to interpretation. And it can be a difficult process if you don't understand the ins and outs, where it came from, what the motivation is behind it. So having a team of people help you and guide you through that initial, what they call development process before you're ready to build is really key to maximizing your investment, making sure you can achieve your goals of what you want, because there's always a different route to go.
But I think it's important to like step back even before you get to that development process. Like I always joke that we need a thesaurus or a glossary for some of the development terms, right? As every industry does. Yeah. But going back to step code, I say step code to people all the time, just assuming that they know what I'm talking about. And they'll be like, whoa, step back a bit. What is the step code?
Step back on the step code.
Yeah. Who determines the step code? What are the levels of the step code? And why does the government put those types of things into play, right?
Yeah.
Those are things that before you even walk up to the front desk to find out what you can do you know what a step code is?
Let me define it super quick for you, for anybody watching. So step code is, it's an energy step code. It's Canada-wide. There are 5 steps. When it was implemented, the step 1 of the step code was basically the building code at that time. Step 5, as it ratchets up to step 5, I think by 2035, step 5, you have to be completely, you have to have the ability to be completely off-grid. What that means is that if you added, say, solar photovoltaics to your roof or, say, ground geothermal, your house could be off-grid. They're still going to be tied to the grid. But theoretically at step code 5, you could be off grid. So the difference.
Those were all really big words.
So I was just you were trying to explain the step code.
We need to define the definition.
That's why we need a glossary.
But this is Andrew.
I was just going to say,
This is why you want him working for you on your property.
Andrew said this word. That means this.
That's photovoltaic.
Yeah. What? That's for the
black panels.
I've never heard that word.
The black panels on your roof that collect.
There we go.
That collect solar energy, and it translates it into energy either in a battery form or it just goes right back into the grid. And the grid is just the electrical wires that come into your house from Fortis or BC Hydro, depending upon where you live.
Well, at one point in time, we heated houses with coal from the basement, right? It's why basements were created, was to put the coal down there to keep the house. And I want to say that it's like 1400s, but it's not that long ago.
They're still doing it numerous places in Western Canada.
Yeah.
Numerous.
Step code 5 is you can heat your house with your blow dry. You may want to watch how many times you blow dry your hair because your house can get too hot.
Everyone's going to want to blow dryer.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. But in saying that, you don't have to heat your house with a blow dryer. But the idea is that we become more environmentally efficient and less required on various parts of our energy source.
That's right.
And our energy grids.
There's lots involved with that outside of just the heating and electrical too, right? I mean, the more windows you have in your house, generally, the harder it is to keep it cool in the summer and warm in the winter. The more interesting your house looks from the outside. In the industry, we call it massing, and it just means how many changes in the wall shape or form, or if there's a cantilever, which just means your house overhangs a lower portion of it. The more interesting the built form, the harder it is to make it energy efficient. So there's a lot of these details that go into building a really energy efficient house.
And when you work in an office of engineers and project managers, they just love to grab thermal sensors and test how cold the drink is in the fridge and how hot one room is in our office next to the next.
Bunch of energy nerds.
Yeah, energy nerds all over the place. But then there's other things that you just don't think about, like the blow test to see what step code you're finishing that home at. There's various things like coming in from a completely different construction industry that we just that you don't consider, and then coming into residential construction where the questions are different, the answers are different, the uses are different, right? So there's a lot of things that you just don't consider if you don't know development.
Well, development and construction, right? So, and that's one of the things with infill is I think everyone, well, I'm not going to say everyone, but for the longest time, if you're going to go buy a lot, you want a lot with the services at the lot line. And that's just like a keyword that would be in listings for lots for sale, services at lot line.
Yep.
meaning your power's there, your water's there.
Sewer's there.
Maybe not. It might have been a septic tank setup too, right?
Could be.
Sewer is not necessarily a thing, but
You can use the GIS to check that, though.
you can use the GIS to check that. You're probably in your urban sprawl going to have that there. But that is something the developer did and set up to be there, right?
Right.
Then your builder comes in and they have all this knowledge and information on step code and windows and direction. And so when you're doing infill, you need to understand your services are not at your lot line
Or may not be.
for what you're doing. Like they're there in the sense your house is there and it operates, but as soon as you add more residences,
Gonna turn around.
your lot line
you might-
is going to change.
Yeah,
right?
you might-
Yeah.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And that's where the development knowledge comes into play.
I would say infill is probably 30% development, and that is zoning, design, infrastructure, and probably 70% construction. Maybe 60-40, but probably 70-30. So there's definitely what the reason I say that is it's not 2% development and 98% construction. There's a heavier development portion leading into the construction than there is on a lot of more simple projects. Just building a house on a new lot, for example.
Yeah. You need a plan of action. You need a direction. You need to know what you're going to build, how you're going to build it.
Yeah.
Make sure you're within the city guidelines.
From dirt to design.
Yeah.
And dirty.
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah.
And we're going to dive way more into that in another video about the developer versus the builder.
That's right.
What those roles are. I think what we want to maybe touch on a bit more is, when you've like had the meetings at the counter and maybe you've called us and consulted with us on your property and you have a bit of an idea of what you can do. Let's talk about some of the things you could come across if you keep the existing building on a property that you want to take into consideration.
Sure. So you need to think, assuming you're probably, if you have a laneway, you have access off of that laneway to your backyard. If you're keeping the house, which likely is in the front half of the property, the front half being your main access street, you need to think about, where am I going to build? How am I going to access that site? How are maybe vehicles going to access that site?
That's right.
So if you have a rear laneway, it's obvious, but in terms of the 11,000 properties that were rezoned in the city of Kelowna, the majority of those 11,000 do not have rear lanes. So we need to think about how are we going to access the backyard or the undeveloped portions of the property. If again, this is the example of keeping an existing house, how are you going to access it from a construction standpoint? How are you going to access it from a long-term use, whether it be vehicles, parking, or pedestrians?
Yeah.
Yeah. And you need parking, right? There's still parking guidelines in the bylaws.
Parking is the main, it's a kind of a joke within our industry, I feel, but you can build what you can park. Like, I've heard that a few times, and it's very true. Like, if you don't have enough room to park based on what the city guidelines tell you to do, then you can't build those units, unfortunately.
Often the driving constraint. So what that means is when you start with a blank slate, often it's hard to understand, like, what should I build here? How much space can I fit? How many units can I fit on the site? Well, often you just start with doing a parking calculation, which is in its zoning bylaw, and that answers all of those questions for you.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So first step is, where does your driveway come in?
Yep. Do you have a rear lane?
No, your front yard cannot be a parking lot. They have addressed that in the bylaws. And where do you put those cars once they're on site?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And if you do keep the existing house, some forms that are pretty common that you can see in most cities is you could have your standard carriage house in the rear, kind of a completely separate dwelling from the existing house. You can do kind of a shop idea, like Jamila mentioned earlier, where you have dwelling units or condos basically above a shop. There's a few examples of that in Kelowna and other municipalities. I've seen container homes get built in the rear of kind of yards. Those kind of act like carriage house, just a different form. Have you guys seen anything else with keeping the existing house there?
Yeah, keeping the existing home, again, best if you have laneways, but you can also do a duplex in the back, smaller duplex. And now that you can go skywards as well, then you can also do like a duplex, essentially a four-plex, and have two different access points and a shared parking space on either side. You see that a lot, especially sort of in the Lower Mission area and the Pandosy Village area. I think a big misconception is that a lot of people don't understand that the neighborhoods they've been driving by for the last 15 years are infill already.
Yeah.
And they forget or didn't know that there was a single family home there to start. And so a lot of times people are driving past these kind of new designs, not necessarily new designs, but four-plexes or six-plexes that are either stacked or side by side, not realizing that didn't always exist. Yeah. So when we're thinking of what kind of designs you can do, we're not inventing this. That isn't new. This is but
examples everywhere.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, and keeping your existing home. The nice thing is you can add a duplex to it. Or I've seen people lift their home and add homes underneath them as well. That one's a little unique.
Wow.
Yeah. That one, I remember long before I was in the industry driving by going, why wouldn't they just put them on top? Now I know better, and now it makes more sense.
Yeah.
But it was weird to see a 70s home jacked up, essentially. Yeah, and constructed underneath. Finding out later on that what they've done underneath is two apartments underneath, rent those out for income, and they're living on
the same house above.
Exactly. So nothing changed except for now and obviously they renovated it as well. So they've changed the exterior and the interior to sort of modernize it a bit. But a nice way to turn a bi-level into 3 different homes.
Yeah.
You gotta really be attached to that. Like you do not want to take that my kid's height registration. That is not coming it's not coming off. Yeah, we are jacking this house up, and we will bring it up to code and add this.
I just mentally went to like the 4 kids whose numbers are on the wall.
Yes.
Out there with like a car jack.
Yes.
Yeah.
Pulling the foundation apart.
Which happens.
Yeah.
We still happens to that stuff. Yeah.
I think maybe the only consideration or layout we haven't talked about, and it is more rare, is adding density to the front yard. And that, of course, depends upon where your house exists.
Yeah.
So in a rare circumstance, the original house will be set back far enough where instead of building in the backyard, or in addition to building in the backyard, I've seen you sometimes do density in the front yard.
I don't know if that's going to be as rare going forward with this blanketed density than has some in the past.
Yeah, it's historically rare, but more common going forward, I would say.
But yeah, you're right, because a lot of older homes, they do have the long driveway leading.
The front yard.
Yeah, lots of privacy from the road, but it's nice, especially if you're the person who wants to maintain your home and stay in that original home, then it's the density that's being pushed towards the road.
Yeah.
Well, in Lower BC is rural then. City.
Yeah, absolutely.
You can even go into West Kelowna, Lakeview Heights, Glen Rose, and a lot of large lot properties there with the 80 spot house on them. And they're large because there was no septic. They had sewer. There was no sewer. They had septic fields in the backyard. You needed a lot of space for that.
Yeah.
These are properties, well, they could be subdivided with another property taken off of it. There could be area in the front. There could be area in the back. So there is not a cookie cutter fit for this. Right. Every single lot is unique to what it is and what the goals are of the owner at the end of the day.
So that kind of goes to assuming that you're not going to maintain the original home, then what are the options that you can do?
Once you demolish.
Once you demolish that.
Yeah.
You obviously have more flexibility once you with a clean slate. So if there's constraints, it'll come back to parking, and it'll come back to services. To the degree services might constrain the site. But really, at that point, it's kind of whatever you want to end up with. If you can fulfill the service requirements, the parking requirements, it's whatever you want.
Mm-hmm.
I should also add that there's also height requirements. For the most part, most infill will be under 3 stories and under.
Yeah.
And there's lot coverage. let's not scare people. There will still be places for gardens and trees on the property.
absolutely.
It will not be end-to-end building with a cinder block wall at the property line that you're looking at now because your neighbor developed their property. There's lot coverage requirements and all of this stuff to make it fit into the existing neighborhood.
And forming character, right? And forming character is one of those things that, again, we say all the time, but people don't know what that is. So to Andrew, for forming character.
Sure. So if you could imagine a very simplistic sketch where you just see the shape of the house and you don't maybe see any windows, you maybe don't see any unique features if there's a
Architectural details.
Yeah. So that deals with form. It's really just the basic shape. And then character is, as you said, what is the character, maybe the existing neighborhood? What is the character that you want to achieve? You know, you could be West Coast modern, you could be contemporary, you could be craftsman. There's all sorts of different characters of homes. And a lot of people have a hard time explaining using the correct term for it. But they can often explain to you, like, you know, I want to see shingles, or I want it to be a very simple built form, and I want it to be white. Well, they're probably talking about a more modernist house in that. So
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure they implemented this to slow down pink and peach stucco from incubate.
maybe.
And that, you know, if that was the rule, then I think it was okay. I think we can all look back at that and
I have yet to have a customer say, can you just do a peach house? that would be a fest.
I think the most ridiculous color combo was actually the development that you worked for, I guess, not that recently, but a while ago, where they did
McDonald's house.
they're all McDonald's colors, red and yellow. Red and yellow.
Great.
Yeah.
That was that even had design guidelines, but
I don't know where that is, but I'm going to get the address.
it was no, it's the wrong.
No, it's being painted. It's being painted. It's already painted. It's gone. Yeah, it was a time in history.
But back to forming character. Even last week when we were together and we were looking at those designs that we've already had done and how it's already gone back to redesign because you know that the city is expecting more from various angles, right? So we popped out the designer had popped out some rooms and added some more dimension to it, as opposed to having the 1950s or 1970s square or rectangle, right? That's all one color stucco. The city and homeowners in general are now looking for more design and a little bit more. And where Andrew said that they don't necessarily know the words that they want to use, 95% of them are going to say modern or contemporary, and they don't realize that in our brains, those are melted together, right? So, or farmhouse, they're definitely going to say
Modern farm. Yes, that'll be the next big trend.
Yeah.
Very 2022.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, when you start with a blank slate, just bringing it back to that, you have two avenues as well. And I think different municipalities, you're going to approach this differently. But at least here in Kelowna, we have kind of suburban zones and urban zones. So suburban, in our context, is you're going to have an allowance to build up to 4 units on one lot, given, again, all of these design requirements that you have to fit in parking requirements, whereas kind of a core zone would be 6 units. And again, depending on parking, and municipalities are going to kind of dictate these based on proximity to large kind of centers. So for us, it's downtown. The downtown core is where you have more density, and the further you go up from our core, the less density that you're kind of allowed to build.
And all cities now too, they all have their own pre-designed plans, right? So they've all, like Kelowna, for instance, has certain centers that they're putting all of their focus towards. It's essentially going to be various little downtowns. So those centers make it easier to kind of come up with proper concepts because sometimes the city has already done that. They've already got those expectations in play. Whereas now with the new legislation, that is also broadened greatly. So now you can, going back to that concept of we keep our existing home and build in the laneway, or we keep our existing home and add to it. Then the other thing is, then we go to duplexes, then we go to triplexes, then we go to individual homes that are not sharing walls. right? But all on the same lot and maybe sharing a parking area. Or we all the way up to the six-plexes that we were discussing, but there's various form and character and design and number of units and how those number of units come into play. Are they connected? Are they not connected? Is it that they're connected via a garage? Like that really becomes about the knowledge of us to help people understand what they can do on it, and that it doesn't have to be roads, right? It doesn't have to be all fronting the road. And it doesn't all have to be sharing walls or disconnected. And how are you going to connect those homes? And so that there's a lot of that concept that people can't really wrap their heads around either.
It also doesn't have to be like 4 or 6,
right?
Whatever the zone
Right.
is set.
Exactly. Yeah.
You could,
Those are max.
Yeah.
Max numbers based on area.
You can love your location and be totally sick of staring at your kid's height chart on the wall.
Yeah.
And want to tear that thing down and build new.
And that's okay. Parents everywhere, it is okay to paint over that.
Well, you might want to tear it off and put it in the basement, put it trim.
Another option.
Yeah.
Keep your memories.
That could be a whole other company that we design is
Height for restoration.
how to move the charts.
Yeah. Height chart. Did I say that right? And you guys get it.
So wrapping that up, I mean, we're focusing on infill. Missing middle includes both low forms and high density forms of infill.
Yeah.
For the most part, the new provincial mandates are going to be gentle density. You can keep your existing home and you can add on to what's there, or you can do total fresh start, demolition, and then clean slate. And again, depending upon where you're located in your respective city, that could look like 2 units, 4 units, 6 units, etc. And then, of course, the other factor to consider is whether it's suburban or urban locations. There are different constraints and there's different design guidelines for each.
Yeah. So far, we've sort of hit dirt and design.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's the next step.
Financing next.
Financing's next.
And if you're already confused but want to keep going, you can call and talk to us in person.
Always.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Thanks for watching our video. This is Performance Infill. You can find us at performanceinfill.com. Our phone number's there. Give us a call. Let's chat about what you can do.